Okay, so your Chitmo greetings, yet I say everyone for joining in with us once again. We're dealing with this important topic. I want to bring up this image that we utilize for the promo for the broadcast. Okay. So for those who are unfamiliar, my name is Odwirafo Kwesi Radnahempata Akan, Odwirafo of Akwamumaina Maruka, Atifimudi Akwamu Nation in North America within Ojiraman, Purified Nation, AFURAKA, AFURAITKAIT, meaning African Black people in the Western Hemisphere. So what we want to talk about tonight, and some of you have been on over the past few weeks where we've been going live on YouTube, dealing with a number of different topics. Tonight, we want to focus on AFURAKA, AFURAITKAIT, the masculine and feminine name for origin, original name for Africa and so forth, and talking about our SPIRI-GENETIC identity as AFURAKANI, AFURAITKAIT, meaning African people, Black people, and so forth. So you see this, the imagery that we use. On the right, you see the female divinity Rait, who is the creatress of the universe. You'll see on the left, the male divinity Ra, who is the creator of the universe, and the Creator and Creatress function together as one divine whole, the great spirit of the Supreme Being. The Supreme Being is Amen and Amenet. We're going to get into that. One of the titles of Ra is Afu-Ra. One of the titles of Rait is Afu-Rait. And when we look in the language of ancient Khanid and Kemet, Nubian Egypt, you will see that Ka, as well as Kait, the masculine and feminine terms for soul or divine consciousness, but they're also the masculine and feminine terms for a high land, a land above the surface of the water. So AFURAKA, AFURAITKAIT, the land Ka of Afura, the land of the Creator, the land Kait of Afurait, land of the Creatress. So we are the first to give the proper etymology and cosmology of the term Africa in our book, AFURAKA, AFURAITKAIT, the origin of the term Africa. So that's what we are going to examine tonight. So let me just pull this book up. Okay, so, but before we get on that, let me show you exactly where you can find the text. So this is the Nhoma page on our website. Nhoma is the Akan term for books, publications, and so forth. So when you go to the Nhoma page, you will see all book covers of all 31 of our books. You can download all of these books for free. So to date, I have published 31 books. We do have some more books coming out this year, but to date, I have written and published 31 books, and one of them, this seminal text, is AFURAKA, AFURAITKAIT, the origin of the term Africa. So when you go to our Nhoma page and you click on the cover, it will take you to the specific page for the book, and you will see the book there, and you can just click on the cover and download the ebook version. And I will put this link in the chat room for you all. So that's the link to the book itself. And then this is the link to the Nhoma page where you can download all 31 of our books. All right. So when we first published this book, we published the book. Initially, it was a series of articles on the origin of the term Africa and so forth. We published that series back in 13,007 into 13,008, so-called 2007 into 2008. That was the publication aspect of it. But we first began to publish in the context of our first audio book that we also committed to writing as well, in the Kukutuntum, the Ancestral Jurisdiction. And we released that in 13,002, so-called 2002. So it's been 22 years when we first put out this detailed information about the etymological origin of the term Africa, AFURAKA, AFURAITKAIT, as well as the cosmology that undergirds the term. But when we published it and put some details, with the images from ancient Kemet and so forth, in the context of a publication, it was a series of articles. And then we combined those articles into this volume. We went 1 through 4, and this is what the book is. But we've been teaching this for over 20 years. First evidence in the book Kukutuntum, the Ancestral Jurisdiction. So, the reason why we published the information is because of so much misinformation regarding our identity. Because of enslavement, colonization, our enemies, the whites and our offspring, have sought to make us feel inferior by brainwashing our people with false information, trying to put forth the false idea that Africa comes from Romans, Africa comes from the Latin or Greek or Phoenician or Sanskrit or a number of different false etymologies. We address all of those false etymologies. People don't want to identify with Africa because they've been conditioned to believe that is inferior. Just like they don't want to identify with the term or color black because they think is inferior. Pure stupidity. The reason why we have embraced that is because of colonization, enslavement. Black is a term that we have always used, and we did an entire etymological breakdown of the term black, coming from the Proto-Indo-European root bere, which comes from the ancient root bidi, which means black. It also means powerful. We did an entire broadcast on that, and we'll touch on some of that tonight as well. But the origin of the term Africa goes directly to the nature and function of the deities that govern us as Black people, as Afurakani, Afurakaini people. The same with the term Black. Because we've been colonized, enslaved mentally, you have a number of organizations who put forward idiotic ideas, false notions that Black means death, like the foolish Moorish doctrine, which is pure stupidity, has no basis in reality. It's only based in self-hatred. When people put forward false notions that Africa comes from the Roman general Scipio Africanus, totally false. We're going to disprove that. When you have individuals saying that we never called ourselves African, we never called ourselves Black, pure stupidity. It's always based on self-hatred. When you hate your skin color, you hate your features, you hate the texture of your hair and so forth, you hate your identity because you've been enslaved mentally and spiritually, colonized mentally and spiritually, you will put forward and embrace these mentally ill ideas because you're suffering from mental illness. No different than someone with getting on our knees praying to a fictional cartoon character deity who never existed, Jesus, Yeshua, praying to a white male who never existed, praying to a white male thinking that's a deity. That's an expression of mental illness that's been cultivated within us in a negative capacity by our enemies. When we wake up from that, of course, we reject that foolishness. White has never been superior. Of course, it's inferior. We don't pray to fictional cartoon character deities like Jesus, Yeshua, Allah, Yahweh, Brahman, Buddha. These are all fictional characters who never existed in any form or of any race whatsoever. In our Kukutuntum, the Ancestral Jurisdiction, we address all of those fictional characters and how they were manufactured. Muhammad, Abraham, Isaac, Ishmael, Solomon, Sheba, Menelik, David, Aaron, Moses, all of these fictional characters, Yahweh, Allah, Buddha, Yeshua, Jesus, Yeshua ben Pandera, all of these fictional cartoon characters we address in our book, The Kukutuntum, the Ancestral Jurisdiction. We'll touch on some of those a little bit later as well. But we want to get to the root, the etymological root, the origin of our identity, biologically, but also spiritually, our SPIRI-GENETIC identity specifically for Black people. So this is why we wrote the book. Now, we start off immediately with an image from one of the papyri in ancient Kemet showing the name AFURAKA spelled out in the papyri. Many individuals who were enslaved mentally and believed what the whites and their offspring had to say, they would try to say, well, you can't find Africa anywhere in any ancient text. And we show the ancient text on the front cover. We also show the variation of that from the Temple of Philae in ancient Kemet, AFURAKA, and we go into detail about that. So that's directly from the Temple of Philae. This is from one of the papyri. And this, of course, is the continent right side up with the south at the top and north at the bottom. It's Europeans who decided to take the globe and say that north is the top and south is the bottom. But in reality, south is at the top, north is at the bottom, and that's proven in the language of Kemet when you have the term for west, Amentet, is also the term for right, the direction right. And the term for east, Aptet, is also the term for left, the direction left. The only way right can also be west is if you're facing south. If you're facing south and you point to your right, you're also pointing west. And if you point to your left, you're also pointing east. If you're facing north, then it's reverse. But if you're facing south, west, Amentet, is also the direction right, Amentet. And east, Aptet, is also the direction left, Aptet. That's one of the proofs that south was always the way that we got our bearings. So south is at the top of the compass, north is at the bottom. And even linguistically, south, the south land is the first land, the foremost land, the land of the beginning, the front land, and so forth, as defined in our ancestral languages. So this is why we have the continent right side up. Now, from the papyrus of Hunefer, 3,300 years ago, we show the actual Medut, the glyphs, Medutu, the glyphs and so forth. And you'll see AFURAKA, and we're going to get into exactly where that text comes from. One of the variations is AFURAKA in the Temple of Philae, so-called Paraka, 2,400 years ago. We're going to get into all of that. First thing we want to do is dispel some false notions. We want to get rid of these false etymologies first that are put forward by misinformed individuals that initially were put forward by the whites and their offspring. So, on page 10 of the text, we address the false etymologies first. The idea that the Romans, Greeks, Arabs, Hindus, or any of the whites and their offspring created the name Africa is absolutely inaccurate. Moreover, the land was not named after Scipio Africanus nor Leo Africanus. Now, the Arab version, Ifriqiya, comes from the Roman corruption Africa, often suggested that the reason why the Romans used the term is because of the Roman suffix ka, means land, and Afri is the name of a Berber tribe and so forth, who occupied the land when the Romans invaded. The Romans are therefore said to have called the territory in the northern part of the continent the land of the Afri, and hence Afrika. The Berber ethnic group is the Afrika. It's spelled Afrika, as well as Afrika and Afarik. Now, the term land, ka meaning land, does not come from the Romans. Let's just prove that very quickly in our appendix. Before Romans existed on Earth and before Europeans existed, white-skinned individuals existed, we were already speaking our language, of course. From the hieroglyphic dictionary, you will see that the symbol, the medut, for the raised land here, they often transliterate it as a Q, but in the Coptic dialect, the late period Kemet dialect is transliterated as a K, the K sound. So Ka, hill, high ground, high place. Reduplicated as Kaka, a hill, a high place. Kat, highland, the Nile banks above the river. In the Coptic dialect, Copt, Kai, that is the highland, the hill, or highland or raised land. The Coptic dialect of the language of ancient Kemet is the late period dialect that came into usage about 2,000 years ago at the end of the dynasties of Kemet. That's the version of the language that was being spoken at the time. And so you'll have the ancient spellings, but in this dictionary, you'll find the Coptic dialectical variant of the term as well. And that gives you the vocalization as well. So Kat, highland, land above the banks of the river. Kait, feminine. So you have Ka, masculine, Kait, feminine. The T feminizes nouns in the language of Kemet. So Ka means land, Kait, feminine. Ra is the creator, Rait is the creatress. Amen is the great supreme being, masculine side. Amenet is the great mother. That was retained in the English language. So the diminutive or the feminine in the English language is et. So you have Shan, masculine, Shanet, feminine. John, masculine, Janet, feminine. Cigar, which is masculine, cigarette, is a diminutive, a smaller, that's feminine and so forth. But that et, or the T or the et, being feminine or the diminutive, that comes from the language of ancient Kemet, and it's throughout the language. So Ka is hill, a high ground, high place above the banks of the river. Kait is the feminine, the land above the surface of the Nile. And then the Coptic dialectical variants, Kai, Koi, and so forth. Then you go further, Ka and Kait. That's the masculine expression and the feminine expression. There's always a balance of masculine and feminine in our cultures. The high place on which the God of creation stood. The first landmass that broke through the surface of the water at the beginning of creation. Ka and Kait. Now, that predates the existence of Europeans, including the Romans, in the world. So the Romans using Ika, meaning land, that doesn't come from their language. It comes from the Medutu, which they could not read. This was written in the Medutu over 4,400 years ago, before there was a such place as Rome, before there was a such place as Italy, before there was a such place as quote unquote ancient Greece. So before the Hinduism came into existence, we were already utilizing this term. So we show the Coptic dialectal variant is Kai. Now, you'll find that same variant in AFURAKA in the papyrus of Hunefer describing the first raised land. But before we get to that, we just wanted to prove that when they say the Roman term Ika, meaning land, it's not a Roman term. So when you hear them arrogate these terms to themselves, they're simply stealing terms from our language and calling them European or Proto-Indo-European or Roman or Latin or Sanskrit and so forth. But they're trying to steal the language and in essence trying to steal our heritage. Now, we talked about the Afrika people, the Berbers and so forth. Let's just show an image of them. Afrika, we're going to get into the etymology of that. Just so you can see an image of these ancient Berber people. So you have Fulani Berbers. These are some Fula women or Fulani women. You have, the Black Berbers and so forth. You have the Tuareg Berber people living in northern AFURAKA right now, where they've been living for the past 10,000 plus years and so forth. And one of their ancient ancestors was living in the region of northern AFURAKA, west of Kemet, in the region of what is now called Libya, west of the Nile and so forth. This Berber sovereign 23rd dynasty of Kemet, Uput, the second ancient Berber or Berber, Bribri individual. The same Tuareg people are directly descendants. Some of our people stayed in that area, and then some of us continued to migrate further west after the fall of Kemet and reestablished ourselves as the ancient empire of Ghana and so forth. So, but these are the Berber people, descendants of the Berber people still exist today in the same region. That's what we're talking about. So it's not that the Romans discovered anybody. They didn't discover anything. We were already there, and we were already using that term. The Afrika people, or Afarik people, that's the Afrika people. That is their name, still is their name, has been their name for thousands of years in their own language. Now, hold on a second. All right. Now, the Afrika people, and we're going to show how Afrika, the AOU, Afrika, and Afrika are dialectical variants of one another. Yes, white Arabs and others have invaded northern Africa or AFURAKA, AFURAITKAIT over the past couple of thousand years. But just like white Arabs invaded northern Kemet and are living in Kemet right now, and they call the area Egypt, those are the white invaders. They're not the original inhabitants. Just like the Dutch invaded South AFURAKA, AFURAITKAIT, South Africa, and so forth, and you have the Dutch, and they were in control for a while. But the original people, like the Xhosa and the Zulu people, are the original people. So the Dutch who invaded a few hundred years ago, of course, are not the originals. The white Arab who invaded Kemet and are now calling it Egypt and are living there in the northern portion now, they are simply invaders. So same thing with ancient Libya and so forth now. Like somebody like Gaddafi, who was in control of Libya, he's descendant from the white invaders. He's not one of our people. He's not an ancient African. He's not family. He's one of the enemy invaders. The original black Libyans still live, and we just saw some images of some of those Berber people and so forth. Those are the original people. He is the invader. So now, when they say the term Africa is derived from the Greek term Afrik, meaning not cold, hot, or the hot country, is also inaccurate. The term Afer means to burn, be hot in our ancestral language. The term Afri means smoke, hot, vapor. That's the reason why the Greeks, having learned of these terms from ancient Kemet, said Afrik, meaning not cold. Let's have a proof of that. And then you also have the term Apreka in Latin, meaning sunny, saying, well, it comes from the sunny land. And what took place when you look at the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization's essay on the origin of the term Africa. So that's a multi-volume series. So different scholars from around the world contributed to UNESCO or United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization's publication on the history of Africa, and part of it deals with the etymology of the term. And they put forward 7 different possibilities because they are unaware of the origin. So they put forward Afrik, meaning not cold or the hot country, coming from the Greek language. They put forward Aprika or Apreka in Latin, meaning the sunny land and so forth. They put forward Apara in Hinduism, in Sanskrit, talking about the land that comes after. They put forward Farika in Phoenician, talking about the land of fruit and so forth. They put forward all these different possible etymologies, and we show that every one of them is inaccurate, and all of them are actually taken from terms from ancient Kemet. So they said Greek Afrik, meaning not cold, meaning the hot land. Apreka, the sunny land. Let's go to our further down in our book, just to demonstrate this. So let's look at it. Afer in ancient Khanate Kemet means to burn, to be hot. Afri, smoke, hot, vapor. So when they said Afrique, Afrique meaning not cold, meaning the hot country, they're saying, well, that's the origin of the term Africa. It came from some Greeks who said it's the hot country. Instead of looking into our ancestral language, they would rather just assign it to the white invaders. But Afrique or Afrique comes from afer and afre, smoke, hot, vapor, to burn, be hot, and so forth. Now, let's go up a little bit further. There are many people who put forth the false and foolish idea that Africa was named after Scipio Africanus, and some will say Leo Africanus. Leo Africanus lived in, the so-called 16th century. In the 1500s, he wrote a book, A History of Africa, and so forth. They mixed up these two individuals because they had the same last name. He lived 500 years ago. So obviously the continent wasn't named after him. So Leo Africanus lived 500 years ago, but Scipio Africanus lived a couple of thousand years ago. So many of our people who deep down inside have such a deep self-hatred, they want to believe that Africa is not an indigenous term. Just like they want to believe that black is not an indigenous term because they hate themselves so much. They want to identify with anything other than black or Africa. Even the terms themselves, they've been so conditioned that when they hear them, they cringe. No different than someone who's been so conditioned with self-hatred, they see someone dark-skinned or who has natural hair, they see that as inferior, they cringe. But as soon as they see light skin and straight hair, they relax and think that's superior. That's insanity. So our people put forth this false notion, repeating what the Europeans said, that Africa was named after Scipio Africanus. They didn't do any research. A child who's 6 years old can Google this and find out that's not true in a nanosecond. But they refused to do the research because they wanted to, perpetuate that self-hatred. So anybody you hear saying that Africa was named after a Roman general or white man or white Roman and so forth, pure stupidity. You can't trust anything they say if they can't do basic research. And many pseudo scholars in our own community, some who call themselves cultural or African-centered or, doing research or metaphysical, have put forth this false notion. So let's prove very quickly that it's not accurate. All you have to do is look at the family tree. His name was Publius Cornelius Scipio. That's the name of Scipio Africanus. He wasn't called Africanus. His name was Publius Cornelius Scipio. That's the family name. His brother's name was Lucius Cornelius Scipio. His father's name was Publius Cornelius Scipio, and he was named after his father. His grandfather's name was Lucius Cornelius Scipio. His great-grandfather's name was Lucius Cornelius Scipio Barbatus. So his last name was Scipio, his brother's last name was Scipio, his father's last name was Scipio, his grandfather's last name was Scipio, his great-grandfather's last name was Scipio Barbatus. So when they invaded, they were fighting Hannibal, the great general and so forth. When they invaded northern AFURAKA, North Africa, and won a battle, he became known as Publius Cornelius Scipio, who conquered Africa, and therefore Scipio Africanus, Scipio who conquered Africa. Now, his brother, Lucius Cornelius Scipio, had a war campaign in Western Asia. And when he won a battle in Western Asia, he became known as Lucius Cornelius Scipio Asiaticus. So Scipio Africanus is the one who conquered Africa, the northern part segment. Scipio Asiaticus is the one who conquered a portion of Western Asia. You never hear anybody saying that Asia was named after Scipio Asiaticus. But when it comes to Africa, they'll say, well, Africa was named after Scipio Africanus. Why are you naming yourself after a white male? Pure stupidity. They know Asia actually goes back to the language of ancient Kait and Kemet. We call that part of Western Asia Seat, and that became Sia and Asia and Asia and Asia later. But just like we call Nubit is the ancient term, and Nubia is the corruption, but it's Nubit, south of Kemet and so forth. We call Seat, Western Asia, and they called it Sia or Asia Asia. So they won't say that Scipio Asiaticus named the continent, and the entire continent of Asia was named after him. They'll just say that he invaded Asia, and then he named himself after he conquered the land. He's Scipio who conquered Asia, Scipio Asiaticus. They also know that's the same that happened in Africa. Scipio Africanus invaded northern Africa, won a battle and so forth, and he was known as the one who conquered Africa. That's simple, basic information. As we said, a child can Google that and will find that information within a nanosecond. And you have individuals, even in our own community, calling themselves scholars who've been teaching the foolish, false notion for 20 plus years that a Roman general named the continent Africa. Pure stupidity. So we dispel of that notion. Let's go up quickly and get rid of the other false etymologies, and then we'll get to the actual etymology. So they'll talk about Latin, the land of the sun, AFURAKA, the sunny land, and so forth. When you look in the language of Kemet, Ra is the divinity who is the creator of the universe, as we're going to see, and Rait is the creatress. They operate through the Aten. The word Aten is the word for sun. Aten, masculine, Atenit is feminine. But the whites and offspring assumed that Ra is the sun god and Rait is the sun goddess. So they started saying that. One of the titles of Ra is Pa, Ra, or Para, which means the god Ra. Pa is a definite article in the language of Kemet. And you learn that when we have a couple of courses, parts 1 and 2, to learn to read and write the Medutintoro, the language of ancient Kemet, the hieroglyphs, and so forth. But you'll see that Pa is the definite article on the masculine side, Para, meaning the, Ra, the creator, and so forth. On the feminine side, Ta is the definite article. So Ta, Rait, means the goddess Rait, and so forth. But here we have Para. In Coptic, it becomes Para or Pre, and also Fre. And you see that right here. But Para, Ka, or Pre, Ka, the land Ka of Para or Pre. This is where the Romans, so-called Latin, get AFURAKA, the land Ka of the quote-unquote sun, because they assume that Ra is the sun. And in reality, Ra's energy penetrates the sun, the Aten, and utilizes the Aten, the sun, to transmit his spiritual energy, just like the energy of Rait, the creatress, utilizes the sun to transmit her spiritual energy. And just so you can see that image of what we're talking about, the image for this broadcast, you will see Rait. She has the Atenet, the sun, as a headdress. And Ra, the creator, has the Aten, the sun, on his crown as a headdress. So there's a difference between Aten and Atenit, the sun, masculine and feminine, and the spiritual forces that animate and illuminate the Aten, the Atenit, the sun, that is Ra and Rait. So let's get back to it. So the suggestion that Africa comes from the Phoenician term for corn, or from the Phoenician term friki or farika, meaning land of fruit. Pera means grains of any substance. Pera became fera. In the Coptic dialect, as well as in Phoenician and so forth. So that is the land of fruit, the land of substance, the land of produce. Pera became fera, and Feraka or Farika, the land Ka of Fari or Pari or Peri, and so forth. That's the land of fruit. That term Parika is a corruption of Farika is a corruption of Parika, the land Ka of Pari, grains of any substance, produce, and so forth. So it's not even a Phoenician term. Farika is not a Phoenician word. It comes directly from Pari in ancient Kemet. When they say that the Phoenician root farak also ph, parak, and so forth, meaning separation, including the notion of diaspora is the origin of the term, the land that's separated or, cut away and so forth. Once again, in the language of Kemet, per or pera means a sign of subtraction, to go away, to leave one's countryside, a calamity. You see the two legs walking away, escaping and so forth. So para, ka, the land ka of para, separation, subtraction, to leave one's country, that becomes a diaspora and so forth. Farak is a corruption of para, ka, that comes from ancient Kanini Kemet. It is not a Phoenician term. You also have perak, perak, to divide, to separate. You even see the hand with the weapon here, talking about a forceful separation. So perak is corrupted into ferak or perak and so forth, to divide, to separate, and all of that. Sanskrit and Hindi, the term apara, apara, and they'll say apara, AFURAKA is the term, and it comes from the Hindus. They'll say that the white Hindus, not the black ones, but the white Hindus, they'll say, they named the continent. Anybody but us. They'll say that they named it. They'll even say extraterrestrials named it. Anything but to give us our credit for our own language, culture, cosmology, etymology, and so forth. Totally nonsense. So they'll try to say that the Hindu term, the Sanskrit term, apara, is the origin of AFURAKA, the land that comes after. They'll say that in Hindi, that which comes after. The reason they say that is because they'll say that India is first in the east, and then the land that's in the west of India, which is AFURAKA, AFURAITKAIT, the continent, that comes after India, because they'll try to say that India is first and foremost and supreme, and then, Africa comes later. So it's the land that comes after, the land that comes, behind and so forth. That's what apara is, and it's the land ka, apara, that comes after. Of course, that's ridiculous. It's false. Para does mean grains of any substance, produce and so forth in the language of ancient Kemet. But pera or para mean what comes forth. It means offspring, posterity, progeny, seed as well. So para is where they get apara in Sanskrit from, stolen directly from our languages. So whether you have Sanskrit, Latin, Greek, Phoenician, every one of these terms that they say is, or Scipio Africanus and so forth, every one of these false etymologies they put forward as the origin of the name from these different, countries and so forth and languages, all of them are false, number one. And secondly, those terms don't even come from those languages. They can be found in the Medutu, as we've just proven. They stole these terms from our language, claimed them as their own, and then later on their descendants today are saying that these are the origins, of the name of our continent, which is absurd. Now, so let's get to the important part. First, we deal with the term Ka. We touched on it already, the land, the highland above the banks of the river and so forth. The raised land, the highland, the mountain land and so forth in ancient Kemet and ancient AFURAKA cosmology, we talk about how the entire planet was covered by water. And once the spirit of Ra and Rait penetrated the primordial earth and moved energy through the primordial earth, they caused volcanic eruptions on the ocean floor. And those volcanic eruptions caused a portion of the ocean floor to surge upward and break through the surface of the water. And that first high land, that first landmass that broke through the surface, is the first landmass of Earth. That's the first high land or exalted land. In the language of ancient Kanini Kemet, as we saw, the high land on the masculine side is Ka, on the feminine side is Kait or Kat. So that's like in English, you'll say mountain or hill. In ancient Kemet, you'll say Ka or Kait. So the Medut representing the soul is Ka, but the Medut representing a raised land, exalted land, a high land, Ka. Also, you see the man with the two arms. Now, we show that's important. You see these two hands. So the word for soul, which we'll see is soul, divine consciousness, is Ka. But the same sounding word, Ka, is also the body of a man, and he has his two arms up. It's the exalted or the high land, the land above the surface of the water. So two variations of the term Ka, but they're cosmologically related. Now, we even show that in the Akan language of Ghana and Ivory Coast, Ka or Koko is a hill or raised land. That's the Kaka of ancient Kemet. In the Yoruba language of Nigeria, Oke is defined as a mountain or a hill. This is the Ke or Ki, another variation in ancient Kemet of the same term and so forth. So Ka, Koko, Oke, Kemet, Akan, Yoruba, all referencing a raised land. There's an Oke Ara in the Yoruba language, which is defined as the hill, the Oke upon which the Orisha, the deities, first descended to create the world. So they have different kinds of Oke, different mountains or highlands, but the Oke Ara is the specific Oke, the specific highland upon which the Orisha, the goddesses and gods, the deities first descended at the beginning of the world to create the world. If you recall, in our appendix, there was a specific Ka, which in Yoruba they would say Oke, Ka, Kait, the high place on which the God of creation stood. So the specific highland, Ka or Kat, or Kait, which became Oke in Yoruba, or Kaka, a highland, Koko in Akan, the land upon which the divinity first settled at the creation of the world. So that's important. So we show that cross-cultural, continuity of culture from thousands of years ago to this very day. Now, hold on a second. And we have to break those terms down individually because it's part of a cosmology. It's not just a series of sounds. It's directly related to deities and their function in creation. That's why it's important. So, in the language of Kemet, Ra is the most ancient name of the creator of the world. Rait is the most ancient name of the creatress of the world. Ra and Rait function together as one divine unit. They are the great spirit of the Supreme Being. The Supreme Being is Amen and Amenet, the great Father and great Mother, the great being. And the spiritual force that animates Amen and Amenet is Ra and Rait. Just like your body, you're like a great being, and your life force energy that circulates through you, that solar force, that creative power, that is your Ra force if you're an AFURAKA man. That is your Rait force if you're an AFURAITKAIT woman. So you're like the great being, Amen, who directs your Ra force to go out and create for you. You're Amenet, the great mother, and so forth, and you direct your Rait force to create for you and so forth. That's what's happening. So the divine living energy moving through plant life, animal life, mineral life, AFURAKANI, AFURAKAIT, human life, moving throughout our bodies. That is the divine living energy of Ra and Rait and so forth. So we already talked about this symbolism of the primordial ocean covering the entire planet Earth. Let me just show an image of this. So we talk about the ocean covering the entire body of the planet. And when the spirit of Ra and the spirit of Rait began to move within, their energy penetrates the primordial planet. When the planet is just being formed, the energy of Ra and Rait penetrate that primordial planetary orb and so forth and begin to enliven it. That divine living energy is moving through the ocean floor and causing volcanic eruptions. And then there's an explosion. The ocean floor, a portion of it surges above the surface of the water and breaks through the surface of the water. And you have the first, not hill, but the first Ka, first Kait. That's the term that we would use. That's a Ka. That's a Kait, the very first one. And if you Google, in YouTube, the formation of an island and watch a time-lapse video of a formation of an island, you'll see a lot of heat. You'll see volcanic eruptions. You'll see explosions coming out the water. And then all of a sudden you will see the landmass rise up above the surface of the water. And then it'll begin cooling down and you see a lot of steam and smoke and so forth. And then you will see a landmass is formed in the midst of water and it's an island. Well, cosmologically, our people said the entire earth was covered with water because of volcanic eruptions on the ocean floor. And physics says the same thing now, and geologists say the same thing. They talk about volcanic eruptions causing a portion of the landmass to break through the surface. We simply add in our cosmology that the source of those volcanic eruptions was the spirit of Ra and Rait moving through the primordial earth, causing that to happen. So you have that first Ka rising up and breaking through the surface. Now you have a Ka and Kait. You have a landmass. Then the spirit of Ra and Rait penetrates the original landmass and enlivens that landmass. And now you have a fertile land because the divine living energy of the Creator and Creatress, just like sunlight penetrating the earth, going through the atmosphere, penetrating the landmass and warming up the landmass and giving it vitality and so forth so plant life can thrive. The spirit of Ra and Rait penetrating the primordial landmass, enlivening it for the very first time and so forth. That's where the life comes from. Now, and that's just an image of that first, landmass. Now, what's important with regard to that are the titles. When Ra moves through the primordial earth and Rait moves through the primordial earth, that spiritual force moving inside matter, it takes on a different title. So the term Af, singular, or Afu, plural, means flesh. Just like in English, flesh means your skin, but flesh can be singular or plural. In ancient Kemet, flesh, the term for flesh, as well as house or place of residence, because your flesh is a house or place of residence for your spirit. Af means flesh, but it also means house or place of residence. That's singular, Af, and then Afu means flesh, plural. So we use both terms. So we say that there, Af means flesh and all of that. You'll find that your flesh is a place of residence for your spirit. In Akan, Ofi or Ofie means house or place of residence. In Yoruba, Afin is a palace, which is a place of residence. That comes from Af or Afi or Afu in ancient Kemet, meaning skin, flesh, but also a house or place of residence for the spirit. Now, Ra is shown in the form of a falcon-headed divinity sitting in the boat of the Aten, the sun. This is the Aten, the sun, and this is the spiritual force, Ra, whose energy will illuminate and penetrate the sun. When the sun rises in the east, sails across the sky, and sets in the west, they symbolize that as the solar disk sitting in a boat and sailing across the blue, watery substance of the sky for the 12 hours of the day. Sunrise, the boat sails across the sky and sets in the west. And Ra takes the form of a falcon, an avian animal, an animal that flies across the sky, sets in the west. So he's Ra. Now, when the sun sets in the west and goes into the quote-unquote underworld, now you have Ra in the underworld. He's inside of a canopy. And that is when they change boats, gets out of the solar boat, the day boat, and gets into the night boat, the sectet boat, and so forth. And then they sail in the 12 hours of the night. So the cosmology talks about how the sun is in the underworld, sailing from the west to the east in the underworld where the spirits are and so forth, bringing illumination to the underworld and vitality to the underworld for the 12 hours of the night. And in the 12th hour, they get to the eastern horizon. Ra gets out of the night boat, gets back in the day boat, and then goes up in the sky and sails across the sky again. When he's in the underworld, he takes the form of a flat-horned ram, a land animal. When he's sailing across the sky during the 12 hours of the day, he's an aerial animal, a falcon. That's a sacred animal totem. Sometimes he's shown as a male, but sometimes he's shown as a falcon and so forth. But when in the underworld and moving through the earth and so forth, he takes the form of a flat-horned ram divinity with a solar disk in between the flat horns and so forth, a land animal. And he's not just called Ra, he's called Afu-Ra. Ra moving inside the landmass. The landmass becomes the flesh, Afu, the house or place of residence of the spirit. So Afu-Ra is Ra in the Afu, Ra in the flesh. When you take in a deep breath, you have air outside of the, outside of you. When you take in a deep breath and pull that air inside of you, now that air is encased in flesh. It's encased in your body. It's encased in your Afu. So you can call that air Afu air, air inside of the flesh. But when you breathe it out, it's just air. When you breathe it in and you hold it in your lungs, it's Afu air, air inside the lungs. When the spirit of Ra's energy is moving through creation, it's Ra. When he penetrates matter, that matter, Afu, becomes the flesh, the house of the place of residence of the great spirit, and he is called Afu-Ra. He's moving through matter. So that's the imagery there, and that's a drawing and so forth. When we went to Kemet, we took a number of images, a number of pictures. We're going to show some of those as well as some other pictures by other individuals as well. So you just saw that image, a drawing. Now this is the actual, this is from the tomb of Seti in the Valley of the Kings and so forth. And as you can see, this is a relief carving, very ornate and so forth, very detailed. And you see Afu-Ra with the solar disk between the flat horns. He has a staff in the form of a serpent and so forth. That is Afu-Ra. And he is in the underworld in the 12 hours of the night. Now, let me switch over to another. That's one image of him. Okay, here's another image of him. And this one is important because we want to show you the spelling. So he's in his canopy, in his pavilion rather. And you see the reed right here, which is the A, the horned viper, which is the F, and then the little determinative symbol of skin or flesh. So that's Af. So that's the singular. Sometimes it is written as Afu, the plural, but he's shown as Af. Sometimes it's written as Af, sometimes Afra, and so forth. But you'll see that spelling right there. Now, I want to show you another variation of that from within the same tomb and so forth. Okay. Now here's another variation. And here you see the 3 pieces of flesh, not just 1, but 3. And the solar disk. So instead of Af, and then the solar disk being the representation of Ra in the Medutu, the hieroglyphs and so forth, instead of, if it was just one piece of flesh, it would be Af-Ra. Since it's three, it's a plural, so it's Afu-Ra. So in this context, he's Afura. And another, mural and so forth, he's Afra. The people know the difference. The people in the culture know the difference. Afra, Afura, and so forth. Different variations of the name, but we just want to show the connection between Afu, Ra, and the different spellings. Now, to show you, so when you go to Kemet and you get these actual images, of course, you can confirm these, what you find written in books and so forth. Hold on, let me pull up a document right quick. We're going to pull up a PDF. Okay. So the reason why we show that, because it's a verification of what you will find in certain texts, but we have the actual, the actual text. So we saw the reed, the viper, and the little piece of flesh for Af and so forth. We just showed that in the actual mural. And here, when you look in hieroglyphic dictionaries, the reed, which is the A sound, the horned viper, which is the F sound, Af, and the piece of flesh is a determinative symbol that's not vocalized, but it's referencing what Af means. So in this context, Af means flesh. But then you have the plural. You have Af and Afu, and you have three pieces of flesh. So instead of Af, it's Afu. Just like in English, the letter S is the plural. In ancient Kemet, the U sound, sometimes written as a U, sometimes written as a W, but the U sound is the plural. So Af, singular flesh, Afu, plural flesh. You see also here, it says, is opposite of the sun god in his boat, who is called flesh of Ra. And here you see the three pieces of flesh and the solar disk. The three pieces of flesh and the solar disk, meaning Afu, Ra. Now let's go back to that image of the three pieces that we just okay, so that was the three pieces of flesh, Afu, and the solar disk. So that's Afura, just so you can see the differences between the two. So once again, anytime the spirit gets inside, moves through matter, he's encased in flesh and so forth, he is Afura. And the same is true with AFURAIT. Now we're going to go down to part 4, just to give a little bit more context to that. Now, we just said Af, off, flesh, and island, and so forth. We said the interchangeability of U, W, and F is found. A poignant example in ancient Kemet. So you have flesh, meat, joint, member, Af, off, flesh, meat, body, carcass. But then you also have limbs, member, flesh. So a dialectical variant, we see this in the language of ancient Kemet. In the Akan language, we saw with the Afrika people, Afrika, and also Ohrika, the OU, Ohrika. There's a dialectical variant when you have the V, the W, the U, and so forth, Afrika and Ohrika. AU and AF or AV are interchangeable. You'll see that amongst the Ewe people in Ghana and Togo, EWE, the Ewe people, they'll say Ewe or Ewe. the V and W interchange, the V sound and the W sound, Ewe and Ewe. You'll see Ovambo in Namibia and Owambo. You'll see Orika, the Orika and the Ofrika and so forth. That's the interchange. But you see it in ancient Kemet, Af and Ah, both meaning flesh. And then you also have Afait, tent, camp, chamber. And you have Ah, which is an island, but Ah, a nest or a home. And we were just showing that Af means flesh, but Af means a sanctuary, a chamber, a place of residence. That's AF. But then you have AU. Ah means flesh, but Ah also means a nest or a home. So there are dialectical variants in the language. Ah and Aet, abode, house, court, temple, shrine, quarter, camp, and all of that. Ahwa, piece of flesh, part of the body, joint, carcass, and so forth. So we just show those different things right there. Just want to show the linguistic differences. It's going to be important for that final piece. So we know that Afura, moving through the primordial landmass, when Ra moves through matter, he becomes Afura. When his spirit moved through that first landmass, that first Ka, that landmass, that highland that broke through the surface of the water became known as the Ka of Afura, the land Ka of Afura, the land Ka of the Creator, AFURAKA. It's phonetically sound, it's cosmologically sound. And on the feminine side, it's AFURAITKAIT, AFURAKAT, the land Kait of AFURAIT, the Creatress. So this is the origin cosmologically and etymologically of Africa. Now, so no European is going to give you that information because they didn't have that cosmology. And someone who's studying some misinformation by Europeans and reading that the Hindus or Arabs or Greeks and so forth name the continent, or Scipio Africanos, they're not studying the cosmology. They're not practitioners of the ancestral religion. They're not engaged in the ritual invocation of Ra and Rait today as people like us who practice the tradition, because Ra and Rait still exist in the Akan tradition, Yoruba tradition, Vodun tradition, and so forth. Under the same titles, we invoke these divinities. If you're not engaged in the practice or you're not doing some study of the actual language and cosmology, you miss the whole point. This is a bird's eye view of the primordial mounds. These are spirit forces, goddesses in the primordial waters surrounding. And looking from the top down on the first landmass, this circular structure is the landmass. There are 8 primordial divinities working the landmass. These are spirits, but you're looking at the primordial landmass in a circular form, the water surrounding the primordial landmass and the female divinities, spirits in that primordial water. So they're looking on top of the landmass from a bird's eye view. And they're showing that the solar disk moved from one side to the other side of the landmass and then eventually showed up on the mountains that showed up on the landmass of the first sunrise in the true story or history of creation. So that's like Ra and Rait moving through the primordial mound that just broke through the surface of the water. Hold on a second. And when they moved through that first landmass that broke through the surface, their energy started moving through that landmass, enlivened it, fired it up, made it fertile, and so forth. And it became a fertilized landmass. That's an ancient cosmological, symbol from one of the papyri in ancient Kemet. But that fertilization is important because then we show the comparison of a fertilized ovum. And you see the comparison here. It's the same representation that happens in the womb when ovum is fertilized. The same thing that's happening on Earth, as we showed thousands of years ago, of that primordial landmass being fertilized. It's the same symbolism, because we're talking about the same process on a microcosmic level that happens on the macrocosmic level. So of course the symbolism matches up with, once there were microscopes thousands of years later, they're going to find the same symbolism, because we could tune in spiritually and see what we needed to see clairvoyantly. So that's that first part. Now we get into the, so that's linguistically, you have the proper information. Ra is Afura, Rait is Afuraitkait. And let's real quickly show, we're going to pull up some information. And this is important because we want to, you want to have primary sources. So when we went to Kemet, last time I was in Kemet, in the temple of Kainsu, in the precinct of Mut, in the temple of Apet Asetu, which is so-called Karnak, you go to the temple of Kainsu, one of the largest and most ornate and most detailed relief of the female divinity Ra'et is found in that temple. And we knew to look to that temple to find that and get some footage of that. So let's show that real quick. Quick little video we took on my iPhone and so forth. So most people didn't even know Ra'et existed. We've been talking about Ra, the Creator, and Rait, the Creatress, for over 20 years, and it's been in our publications since we first published the Kuku Tuntun 22 years ago and so forth. And you find images of Ra throughout ancient Kemet if you know where to look. But you have people going back and forth to Kemet, and they'll stand in front of reliefs of Ra and say, this is the creator of the universe, and they'll keep going. And Ra'et is right there on the other column, and they don't even know to look for her. They don't even know she exists. And they'll focus on Amen and Ra, but they won't focus on Amenet, the great mother, and Ra'et, the creatress. But we knew who to look for, of course. And of course, invoking Ra is part of our ritual practice. So just a couple of 20, 30 seconds, but you get a chance to see her. So that's right. That's a close-up. That is the divinity Mentu, Ra, who she interacts with. But Mentu is a popular, very important divinity, but that's a close-up of Ra. That particular temple was closed for renovation. It's been closed for a number of years and so forth, but we were able to gain access to it and, get that important footage so we can bring that back to our people. Okay. Okay, so that's the phonetic, etymological origin, cosmological origin, but then we get into some aspect of the spirit. So when we talk about Ra and Rait, the Creator and Creatress, the term for spirit in ancient Kemet is Ba, masculine, Ba'et, feminine. So the divine living energy moving through you, your spirit energy, we'll say that is your Ba. If you're male, Ba'et, if you're female. The solar energy surging through your spirit body and your physical body, that golden solar light and so forth, energy that is your Ba, your Ba'et, that's your spirit. And then the soul, the divine consciousness, is called the Ka. For males, Ka'et or Kat for females. So this is the symbol for Ka, the soul, divine consciousness, the divinity in the head region. The bird or the human-headed bird with the little bowl of burning incense, the animate winged fire bowl of burning incense with a flame. So the animate fire, the little human-headed bird with wings, so that's animation. And the bowl of burning incense is fire. So the animate fire within you is your spirit. That is your Ba or Bayat. But your divine consciousness, your soul, your divine consciousness, the divinity in your head region, like the spirit's brain, is the Ka or Kait. So that's what we're showing here. And the reason why that's important, hold on a second. All right. We show those same terms in the Akan language that you find in ancient Kemet and so forth. One of the titles of Asar, he's called Ka Hetep. There's a relationship between Ra and Asar. There's a text when Ra and Asar, the soul and the spirit, meet in the underworld. And that is akin to, so this is Ra and this is Asar, and they meet in the underworld and they unite and work together and so forth. Here you have Asar and Afura, and then they work together. So what does it mean that they work together? Your spirit and your soul working together. It's like the blood in your body is circulating throughout the body. You have oxygen within the blood that, the blood carries the oxygen to all the different cells in the body and so forth. The brain is the physical seat of the soul, the Ka, and the bloodstream is the physical seat of that solar energy that's surging through you. That oxygen that's surging through your blood also has to go into the brain as well. You have to have oxygen in the brain for the cells to work properly. So that's like the Ba and the Ka uniting physiologically. The blood carrying the oxygen that's circulating through the whole body, and the brain itself that's the control center and has the blueprint for everything that should take place, the intelligence center. You have to have the union of the oxygen carrying blood and the brain itself fusing together to work together. If you lose oxygen in the brain and blood is not going to the brain and so forth, that's a stroke, that's a problem. So the oxygen carrying blood, the life force energy within the oxygen circulating through the blood and so forth, that's the Ba, the spirit, and then moving through the brain, the Ka, the soul, and it's a union of the two and they work together. Asar is called Ka Hetep, the mummified figure and so forth. And then you have Afura. And when Asar is in the underworld, the spirit world, and the solar disk sets in the west and then moves through the 12 hours of the night, and then the sun energy is in the blackness where all the spirits are, and there's illumination brought to all the spirits that are in the underworld and so forth, illumination and power and vitality brought into the darkness to illuminate the darkness. Asar is the ruler of the spirit realm, the sovereign, along with Aset and so forth. So when Ra moves through and they unite and connect and so forth, that's the union of the Ba and the Ka, the spirit and the soul. And that bit of cosmology so you see the mummified figure of Asar unites with the Afura, with the ram-headed divinity, and all of a sudden they fuse together, two entities in the same body. The bottom half, mummified half, is Asar when he's called Ka, and then Afura moving through the Ka. And that's no different than a form which is important of spirit possession in ancestral culture. When someone gets possessed by a divinity, you see people playing drums and so forth, a ritual chant, ritual dance. The spirit comes down and possesses the person and starts moving through the body of the person. They start speaking a different language and laying hands to heal people and so forth. Spirit possession takes place. The abosom or orisha of Vodus possesses the person. We always associate it with, if you're driving in a car, you're the individual driving, you're in the vehicle. You're in control of the vehicle. If you stop and allow a friend of yours to get in the car and get behind the wheel and you get in the back seat, now there are two individuals operating in the same vessel. However, you're in the back seat, so your friend is taking control of the vessel and is directing the vessel. You can see everything that's happening, but they're in control of the direction of the vessel. When they decide to leave and you get back in the front seat and take control of, the vessel and so forth, now it's just you in the vessel. Your spirit animates your physical body. When an ancestral spirit or a deity possesses, the spirit gets into the body, spirit possession happens. Now there are two entities in the vessel. That ancestral spirit or divinity, Abosom Orisha Vodu, takes control of the vessel. Your spirit takes the background, they take the foreground, and they're using your arms and legs and mouth and so forth to communicate with the people. So that ancestor or ancestress, that great-great-great-grandmother who transitioned, 20 years ago and so forth, she possesses and it's operating through the body, and she's touching people and communicating people and hugging people and so forth to reconnect. Same thing with the divinity. But at some point, her spirit leaves the body, and your spirit takes the foreground once again, and it's just you inside the vessel. This is a representation of spirit possession when two spirits are working together in the same vessel. When Sar and Ra as Ka and Afura are working together as AFURAKA. Cosmologically, that's the union of the Ba and the Ka. So there's a cosmological connotation for AFURAKA beyond just the original landmass of Earth. We're talking about when the spirit, the Ba, which is Ra as well as Rait, are working in harmony with the Ka, the soul, the divine consciousness. So as you're reading, when you read the book, and of course the book is a free download, you have a better understanding of all the things that we're talking about. So this is one of the reasons we're going through the book and so forth. So when you read it yourself, you'll understand what we're talking about. So you can understand that detail. Talk about the Jed pillar. You'll see the head above the Jed pillar. That's the same as the backbone and so forth. And that's important because you will see a representation of that. You'll see Sar operating through the Jed pillar and the two arms of the Ka, and then the solar disk, which is Afura, moving through the Ka and so forth. So that's AFURAKA as well. Just different variations. We already showed this image of the primordial landmass, the solar disk, solar energy of Ra and Rait moving through the primordial landmass from a bird's eye view. And then the first sunrise. This particular papyrus, Nespaka Shuti papyrus, has the same representation, but instead of the solar disk touching the earth, Afura and Ka, they simply showed it in a different way. They show the mummified bottom figure, and then Afura in the form of a winged beetle. That is AFURAKA and so forth, still showing the same cosmological connection. So we just want to point that out. The term Ka for soul is also in the same representation of the symbol for the two mountains that receive the solar disk and so forth. The Ka, mountain, Ka, soul, Afura operating through the solar disk, touching the Ka or the soul in the mountain, AFURAKA and so forth. So there are multiple, multi-tiered cosmological and metaphysical meanings for the term AFURAKA. One of the other terms, now we just showed, this is a drawing from inside of, in a book and so forth that was representing what we actually showed, the actual mural from Kemet a little bit earlier when we were showing Af. But you see the ram-headed divinity, Afura, in the night boat sailing through the 12 hours of the night. The book is called the Shat Mduat, the book of what is in the Duat, or the underworld of the spirit realm. Now, in the 12 hours of the night, every hour, Afura moves through and finds and, comes in contact with different spirits, different ancestral spirits. And there are texts talking about every hour of the night. So for example, let me just switch over real quick so you can see a better representation of that. So here, once again, you see Afura, and he's moving through, he's in the boat, and he is moving through the 12 hours of the night. Now, let me see if I can. In fact, let me show a better one. I'll show you a different representation of the same cosmological principle, but it's a little bit tighter. Okay. So he's in the boat. Different deities are with him. He's sailing through the 12 hours of the night. And when you look at the text, in every hour there's text there saying, this great divinity Afura has moved into this region of the Duat, and he's come in contact with these divinities, and these ritual incantations are said, and so and so. And every hour there's a different set of ritual incantations. So when you get to the 12th hour of the night, that is the hour of dawn, right before the sunrise. So when the sun sets in the west and goes into the underworld, the first hour of the night. So if the sun set in the west and it's 6 p.m., well, the first hour of the night is from 6 to 7 p.m. Then the second hour of the night is 7 to 8 p.m. The third hour of the night is 8 p.m. to 9. And then once you get to the 6th hour of the night, you're at midnight and so forth. And then by the time you get to the 11th hour of the night, it's like 4 a.m. to 5 p.m. And then you get to the 12th hour of the night, it's 5 a.m. to 6 p.m. And in that 12th hour, that final hour, when he's in the underworld, he's about to get to the eastern horizon. He's going to get out of that boat, and he's going to get in the boat of the sun with the solar disk, and he's going to go up in the sky once again and turn into a falcon and so forth. When he's in that 12th hour, things begin to change. This is the period of dawn, and he's about to emerge through the earth, rise through the earth, and then get through the earth and come up out of the horizon from the earth and go up into the sky. But this is the transitional zone when he's going from the underworld through the earth on the horizon, the solar disk coming out of the horizon, coming from this landmass, and about to jump up into the sky. So what does the text say in the 12th hour of the night of the transitional zone? That's key to the cosmology. The journey of Afura in the 12th hour of the night reads, this great God in this picture, Afura, journeys along through this city by means of the faithful servants, the Amkyu, of this hidden image, the Ka of Ankh-Ntoru. His deities draw him along by a cord. He enters into his tail and comes forth from his mouth and comes to the birth under the form of Kepra, which is the beetle form, and so forth. And the gods who are in his boat do likewise. He takes up his place on the face of the hidden image of the horn or forehead of the sky at the end of the thick darkness. That's the end of the night. He's about to come into the sunrise. Then this great God takes up his position in the eastern horizon of heaven. And Shu receives him, and he comes into being in the east at sunrise. Those who are here are they who have their bodies, and they come forth in the following of this great God into heaven. This is the image, hidden image of Ka, of the serpent Ankh-Ntoru, which is by his den in the Duat, and he rests in his place every day. And then they show a depiction of the great serpent Ka, who is called Ankh-Ntoru. And what they're saying is the boat of Afura, once it gets to the 12th hour of the night, what happens is it enters through the tail of this great serpent. It enters through the tail of this great serpent. And once it goes through the body of that great serpent and comes out of the mouth of the great serpent, then it's born into the world. So Afura, his final passage in the 12th hour, he has to pass through the body of the great serpent, whose name is Ka. Afura moves inside of the Ka in order to be born through the earth. That is Afura Ka. And when he comes out of the mouth of the serpent, That is the solar disk rising from the earth itself. So that point of when the solar disk is coming out of the earth, not when it's up in the sky yet, but when it's moving out of the earth and you see the first portion of the sun rising above the horizon and so forth, is coming out of the landmass. That landmass at the 12th hour of the night is the open mouth of the serpent Ka, and Afura is moving through the Ka. So once again, we have a cosmological foundation for AFURAKA, talking about the landmass through which the creative spirit operates. And we have to go through all of that because of the way people have lied about the culture. So, and this shows the deity Nu holding up the boat at the 12th hour of the night. And then eventually, Ra operating through the solar disk, he gets caught by the female divinity Nut, who's in the sky and so forth. She captures him in the sky. She captures him and then hoists him up in the atmosphere and so forth. And that's what happens. That's what takes place. And just as an aside, this divinity, Nu, this is the primordial water in the underworld and so forth. And Nu is the spirit in the primordial water, the energetic force in the primordial water. His name is spelled N-U and also N-U-H. And of course, he's holding up the boat with the deities and the male and female divinities and so forth in the primordial floodwaters, in the underworld, eventually born from those floodwaters and so forth. And Nu is corrupted into Nuak and Nua and Noah, and has the boat with the ones who survived the flood, who come out of the flood and populate the world. That's where they stole the story from. All right. So we showed all of that. We also get into, some information with regard to the divinity Ptah, who's at the core of Earth and so forth. You can read through that in the text. We just wanted to focus on the AFURAKA part. When we talk about the origin of the term Al-Kebulan, Dr. Yosef Ben Yakanin put forward a quote from Leo Africanus, who wrote this book in 1526. He's the one that said the Ethiopians and others call the land Al-Kebulan. That is not the original ancient term. It's actually an Arabic term. So, and we give the etymology of the term Al-Kebulan. And we're the first ones to do that and show where it actually comes from. So Al-Kebulan is not an ancient indigenous term for the continent. It's an Arabic corruption. So, and those who study language should have known just by the prefix al, which is a definite article in, Kanana and Northwest Semitic and so forth. They should have seen that. But Al-Kebulan, the prefix al, like in Arabic, al-Kitab, meaning the book, or al-Nur, meaning the light in Arabic. Al becomes el in Spanish, like el presidente, meaning the president, or el toro, meaning the bull, and so forth. So when we go back to our people who migrated from northern Kemet and migrated into the Near East and established ancient Kanana, which is later corrupted into Canaan and Palestine and so forth. In the Kanana tradition, al is a title that comes from ar or ur in ancient Kemet and so forth. So al is a title, like al-Gabal and so forth, the title of the creator. Alat is the title of the creatress and so forth. That comes from ur and urat, become ul and alat, and al and alat, and el and elat in so-called Hebrew and so forth. But these are titles. Comes from the original title ur, became ul, and urat became ulat, and so forth. This is where that comes from. So we go into the information. Ra, meaning Ra, the great one, becomes Ra. You have Amen, means Amen, the great. Heru, Heru, the great. Urat, Hekal, the great goddess of divine words, and so forth. we go into some linguistic detail about that. Arabic and so forth, and so-called Hebrew, which is not even a real language, they stole these terms from ancient Kanana, which is a variation of Ura and Urat in ancient Kemet. So Leo Africanus, A Geographical History of Africa, written in 1526 AD, he says that the Arabians and Ethiopians refer to the continent as Al-Kabulam with an M. That's because they were speaking Arabic and Amharic and so forth, and these terms are corruptions. So it's not an original indigenous name at all. So we show the corruption of Ra, Ur, becoming Ura, corrupted into Ura and Ula and Ila, Ila and Allah and all of that, all the corruption. We go into detail about that. That's some linguistic information you can check out. But the root of Al-Kabulan is Kebu. And this is the north wind divinity who is called Kebu. In ancient Kemet, you see ram divinity as well. Very important. In Rome, the god of the southwest wind was called Afer Ventus, meaning the Afer or African Ventus, the African wind. We saw that Afer means hot and so forth in our ancient language. So they called the southwest wind Afer Ventus, the African wind. And they called the god of the southwest wind Afrikas. This is the deity of the southwest wind. They called him Afrikas because he came from, for them, northern AFURAKA, AFURAITKAIT was southwest to them. So they called the southwest wind divinity Afrikas, the divinity from Africa, and Afer Ventus, the African wind. And then Europeans began to say, well, the Romans named the continent Africa after the god Afrikas, which is pure stupidity. They learned about the divinity from us. Now, Kebu or Kebui is the northwest wind. You see, this is Italy and so forth. And this is AFURAKA, AFURAITKAIT. So southwest is this region here. And let me make sure you can see that. So this is the boot. This is Italy. Southwest is this region right here. The southwest winds will blow on the region of ancient Rome and Italy and so forth. And they said the southwest wind force that came up and touched them, that's Afer Ventus, the African wind, Afrikas to them. That is divinity Kebui in ancient Kemet. So, but for us, that's the northern wind. The north wind divinity, as you can see here, north wind. For us, that's northern AFURAKA, AFURAITKAIT, so that's the north wind. For them, that's the southwest wind. But for us, that's the northern wind divinity. So for them, Al-Kebui, which is Al-Kabulan and so forth, the land of the north wind divinity, they called it Afrikas, but Al-Kebui is part of that root. And the reason why that's important, let's pull this up right quick. When the sun sets in the west, the cool north winds directed by the deity Atem, who's in the red setting sun, are then felt. This is why in our ancient text, the Pert and Meru, so-called Book of the Dead, what do we say in that ancient text? I am a follower of Tahuti, rejoicing in all that he has done. He brought the sweet air for your nose, life and vigor to gladden your face, and the north wind, Kebu, the north wind divinity, that comes from Atem for your nostrils. When the sun is in the form of a red solar disk, and you see the deity Atem sitting in the red setting sun, the sun sets, Atem is causing the sun to set, and it takes the form of a red disk and so forth. And when Atem causes the sun to set and complete the day, he sends the north wind divinity Kebu to cool your nostrils. And that's what the text just said. When the sun sets in the west, this ram-headed divinity's energy manifests. When the sun sets in the west, Ra also takes the form of a flat-horned ram divinity to go into the underworld. We knew the difference between the ram divinity Kepu, who is the cool wind that's shot forth from the west when the sun sets. And even if you're in places like California and so forth, and it's very hot and the sun sets and you feel this cool breeze coming off the ocean and so forth, when the sun sets and then the cool wind is sent from that area, that's the energy in that cool wind is Kebu. We say the deity Atem has sent Kebu for you to cool you off. We knew the difference between Kebu, the ram-headed divinity who manifests at the sunset in the cool wind, and the other ram-headed divinity, Afura, who manifests in that form when the sun sets and he goes into the underworld. The whites and offspring combined those two together and said that's Al-Kebui and Al-Kebui land, the land of Al-Kebu, the land of the north wind divinity, which for them is the southwest wind divinity. They're just corrupting information across the board based on ignorance and misunderstanding. Now, we also show, which is very important, we're talking about the sun setting in the mountains in the west and so forth. There's a relationship between Al-Kebu, Al-Kebui, and El-Kebul, El-Gebal, and so forth. The term Gebal in Hebrew, Gevul, Arabic, Gebel or Jebel, means mountain. In the ancient Kanana language that predates the Pseudo-Hebrew and Arabic and all of that, in ancient Kanana, Gebal means mountain, but El-Gebal is the great deity El of the Gebal of the mountain. El-Gebal, the great father, old man of the mountain. That is a title of Ra in Kanana. The wife is Balat, Gebal, and so forth. That's a form of Heteru and so forth. So we just go into detail and we show what happened when the Romans took over. They learned about El Gabal. They start talking about they were worshiping El Gabal. They created the El Gabalium and so forth. They start saying that they were representing, the great divinity El Gabal. They called him Heliogabalus and El Gabalus and so forth. Corruption of the deity El Gabal. A number of different things. But when you look at the language, El Gabal, the old man of the mountain, El Gebalin is the two mountains. That is a title of the Atlas Mountains in northern AFURAKA, AFURAITKAIT, and so forth. They took that same title, El Gebalin, between the two mountains, represented in ancient Kanana, El Gabal, the old man of the mountain, and so forth. And this is where you get that term, El Gebalin, between the two mountains, and so forth. This is where you get El Kebaline, referencing an original landmass that has something to do with the two mountains from which the divinity, the solar divinity, would rise and create the world. It goes back to the original landmass, the original mountain that was the first landmass to rise above the surface of the water. But in ancient Kanana, when we migrated into ancient Kanana, so-called Canaan, later Palestine, Israel, and all of that, we use the same kind of cosmology, but the language as it changed and so forth. We're saying El Gabal, a title of Ra, the old man of the mountain, the two mountains, the Gebalin, and so forth. Between the two mountains, the solar disk between the two mountains, and so forth, El Gebaline. And so this is why in Arabic they repeated El Gebaline or El Gabal line and so forth. It became El Cable line. Then they started saying El Cable line not only represents the land between the two mountains, but that is the title they would use in Arabic for Africa. But it comes from ancient Kanana, which references an aspect of our cosmology, but we weren't in ancient AFURAKA, AFURAITKAIT, calling the land El Kebaline. That never happened. That's an Arabic corruption of an ancient Kanana term that references a feature of the cosmology that was referencing something prior to us moving into ancient Canaan. So And this is important. So when you read through the book, you'll get all these details and you have a better understanding of this. And just as an aside, once again, the deity Atem, when he is in the red setting sun, and the red setting sun penetrates the western horizon and it goes into the earth. Atem, the first male deity on earth, when the sun hits the earth for the first time, the first sunset in creation. Atem operating through the red setting sun. This is where you get Adem or Adam, the first man on earth. And they say Adama means earth, and Adama means red or reddish or ready. And so reddish or, ready and so forth. Adam, Atem, the first male on earth, operating through a red energy and so forth through the earth. That's where they stole the cosmology from. And his wife, Kafa, is Asase Nebet Tepet. Her title is Kafa in Kemet. So Atem and Kafa is corrupted into Adem or Adam and Chava or Adam and Eve, stolen from titles of deities of ancient Kemet. We talk about that in one of our other books. So we also show Amen, the divinity Amen. This is the great mother divinity Amenet. Here you have Amen and Amenet together. They're called Nyame and Nyamewa and Akan and so forth. We were talking about that in the context of the land of the plumed serpent. So the land Ka of Amen Ra, Ameraka, America, and so forth, Amuraka. So in the Inca tradition, when they talk about the feathered serpent, the plumed serpent, of course, our people were here, built pyramids just like we did in ancient Kemet and so forth. So Amaru, the plumed or feathered serpent in the Inca tradition. And they say Amaruka is the land ka of Amaru, the plumed or feathered serpent. That comes from the land ka of Amera, who's also called Ameru, the feathered or the plumed serpent. Amen is shown as a great serpent, Irta, in the cosmology of Ta'apet, or so-called Thebes. So, and he has the great two feathers, the two plumes that go out, ascend from his crown and so forth. We were just showing that. We don't have to focus on that tonight. That's just an aside. Hold on a second. So this is the island of Philae, so-called Philae, but Pilak or Paraka. And this is also important because I'm talking about AFURAIT here. When you look in the Imeru, so-called Book of the Dead, Book of Coming Forth by Day, in the Papyrus of Ani, as well as the Papyrus of Hunefer, which is on the front cover of our book, there's a particular text when Ra is talking about the creation of the world. And he says, I am Ra and his rising. In the beginning ruled this has he. Then they say, who then is he? It is Ra in the beginning when he rose within Hinin Su as a king within existence. Not yet had come into being the pillars of Shu. He existed upon the highland in Kimenu, within Kimenu and so forth. And he says, I am the great God. So they were talking about the creation of the world in that particular text. And he says, before the pillars of Shu, this is the deity Shu separating the earth deity Geb from the sky divinity Nut. And he's separating the sky from the earth. Like at night, of course, the sky is touching the earth, but then when the sun rises, you'll see it looks like the sky is being pushed away from the earth and so forth. That is the deity Shu separating the sky with the stars in her belly from the earth divinity Geb and so forth. But Ra is saying before Shu, the pillars of Shu separated earth from sky and so forth. He's talking about that era. So what happened before Shu separated earth from sky what took place. And we just read that text. And Ra says, Anuk Ra Kai F Sha Hek Punef Puntra Aref Su. I am Ra. Anuk Ra means I am Ra in his rising. In the beginning, ruled this he, meaning ruled this has he. He has ruled this from the beginning. They say, who then is he? Ra it is, or it is Ra. In the beginning, rose he. In English, we would say he rose within Hin and Su as a king, or within sovereignty, within existence. Not come into being the pillars of Shu, meaning before the pillars of Shu had come into being, before that even happened, he was there first. Existed he upon the high land of that which is within the region of today's Kimenu. The whites in offering call it Hermopolis. We call that region Kimenu. But there was a great mound that rose up in the region which is now called Kimenu. Before the pillars of Shu came into existence, Ra caused the landmass to rise up, and he existed upon the highland within Kimenu in the beginning. And he says, I am God, greater the great God. Existed he upon the highland. AFURAKA. You see AFURAKA referencing the title of Ra when he existed upon the highland, the first land to rise up in the beginning of creation. What is the corroboration for that? Ka, the high place on which the God of creation stood. Ka, a hill in Kimenu, so-called Hermopolis, on which the heavens rested. So in the text, what we're talking about, and what Ra's talking about when he's talking about the creation of the world and so forth, the establishment of the land, before the pillars of Shu, before that first separation of, day and night and so forth, it was he who rose in the beginning. It is in the beginning when he rose in the beginning, caused the landmass to surge above the surface of the water. It became the first Ka, Kait. And he rose within that landmass in the beginning, penetrated that landmass as Afura and so forth, the divine living energy moving through that first highland or hill or mountain and so forth that burst through the surface of the water. It is Ra in the beginning. He rose within Hin and Su, that's the region today that's called Hin and Su now, within existence. Not yet it came into being the pillars of Shu. Before that even happened, he rose. And he rose in the beginning. He rose through that landmass and existed he upon the highland. He who exists upon the highland, that is AFURAKA. In the other text, is AFURAKAI. Let's look at both of them. In the papyrus of Ani, it's AFURAKA. In the papyrus of Hunefer, slight variation. It is AFURAKAI. And you see this stepped slope of land and so forth, a terraced slope of a highland, a hill with terraces. The other one is a smooth slope, but in the papyrus of Ani, it's AFURAKA. In the papyrus of Hunefer, same chapter 17. Hunefer is somebody who transitioned. He had a papyrus in his tomb. In chapter 17 of that papyrus, you find AFURAKAI. Ani was a different individual. He transitioned. When you go to Ani's tomb, they found the papyrus. And chapter 17 of that papyrus is AFURAKA. Still talking about the Kaka, the primordial land. This is for the fools who said that AFURAKAI doesn't exist in any text of ancient Kemet. And you can't find the origin of the term Africa in ancient Kemet because you can't find any text where it says that. But it's been there the whole time. And not only just saying that phonetically, just the sounds AFURAKAI, but specifically when Ra is talking about his creation of the first primordial landmass, that's when he identifies himself as he who exists upon the highland. So to be and exists, F, he, her, upon, Ka, highland. And we go through that entire piece. You see the face in the sky and so forth. Hair is also the term for hawk or falcon. Ra is the great hare or falcon, but he's also the great face in the sky. Then we show that slope is the ka sound and so forth. So we go into the linguistic information to show who's who. We show that terraced slope, and you see Alsar sitting on that terraced slope and so forth. So we go through a great deal of information to prove linguistically and cosmologically that Ra's identifying himself as the one who rose up in the beginning, before the pillars of Shu, before the first day and so forth. He rose up when he forced that landmass to rise up, above the surface of the water, entered that landmass as Afura and so forth. And he existed upon or within that highland in the beginning of creation. AFURAKA, AFURAITKAIT is a variation of AFURAKA, talking about the exact same thing. So then you have to, assess when people say, well, Africa comes from a white man. Imagine how idiotic that is when they have no knowledge of linguistics, no knowledge of cosmology, no knowledge of these deities, no knowledge of the relationship between Ra and Alsar and Rait and Aset and Amen and Amenet and Afu, and they have no knowledge of that. A white person said it came from a cracker, so it came from a cracker. That's how our people operate sometimes. So we talk about Afrika. We show the relationship between Afuni, Koko, and Akan. And we talked about the Berber people being called Afrika. We talked about a region in Akan culture called Afuni, Koko. And that's the primordial land and so forth, from which the primordial people came and so forth. And we go into some details showing that the Akan people have the same term. Afuni, Koko is the primordial Koko, or land, upon which the first people, when they came up out of the ground at the beginning of creation, established their place of residence. So the Akan people are saying the same thing that we've said in ancient Kemet for thousands of years. So you can read through that, you'll see the details of that. And we also talk about in Akan how they call themselves Yefri. Yefri meaning the people from the beginning, the Aborigines. That's the Efri people. But finally, we want to touch on Paraka. And just to, when you look at ancient Philae, Paraka is a very important site. And I want you to see that, an image of that. When we took one of our study tours to Kemet, that's one of the places that we went to. And it's an island, ancient island, where the Nubitu, the Nubians are and so forth, the founders of Kemet. Hold on one second. Let's just, let me make sure you can, hold on one second. We show the image in the book, but we want you to see the actual living culture. So this is ancient Paraka, where the Nubitu, these are the original, of course there are a bunch of Arabs in Kemet, but these are the original people who've been there for tens of thousands of years. And they are still there, and they're running the ferries to the island of Paraka, so-called Philae. But that center is a very important sacred center in Kemet. So when you're in the little ferry boat and you're sailing to the island and you see that great temple of Aset, very important for our cosmology. So let me move through this real quick. this is the place where they talk about the priests of Paraka, Philae, talk about this is where the primordial mound was. Rose up out of from the surface of the water and so forth. This is where the primordial mound was. And they have their title for that. And it's important to see that and see how you cross the water and get to that sacred island that's in the midst of the water and so forth. So this is the image of the place that we just showed you and so forth. But we said that Af is one pronunciation and Ah is another. Limbs, flesh, and so forth. But Af also meaning chamber, camp, and so forth. Ah also meaning flesh, but also court, abode, temple, shrine, and so forth. So that relationship between Afrika, and Afrika that is found in our ancient dialect. You have Ar, Kat, Raka, Rakat, and their variations of the spelling. But when you go to the temple of Paraka, this is the Rakat, the landmass, the flesh, the house or place of residence of the Great Spirit. Raka, and then Rakat with the T, so the masculine and feminine versions. The actual spelling you will find, this is directly a picture from the temple of Paraka, Philae that we went to. This is the symbol for the open mouth, this is the R sound, and this is the landmass itself, the Ka sound, so that's Raka. And the priests and priestesses of Paraka or Philae, they said they were living in the region in the south that is the primordial landmass that rose up from the water, and eventually the rest of the landmass of the continent will come from underwater, but that was the high point. So if you think about the continent of AFURAKA, AFURAITKAIT, imagine all of it being underwater and the first high point of it surfacing, and that was Raka. Eventually, the waters would recede over, thousands of years and so forth, and the entire continent would rise up and so forth. But they would talk about this is the point, the high point, this is the region, this is the landmass that rose up above the surface of the water. It was the only landmass in existence, and it's Raka, masculine, Rakat, feminine. That is landmass, and this is the spelling there. So for fools that say we don't have the spelling in Kemet, it was never found in any temple or tomb or shrine and so forth, that's absurd. The Berbers, we talked about the Afrika people. They spell their names in a couple of different ways. We just showed that. Even the Tuareg, it's really not Tuareg, it's Ta-Areg. The T is the feminizing principle and so forth, but it's the Areg people. Areka, Arika, and some of them pronounce it Afrika to this very day. And if you Google the Afrika people, you're going to see both spellings. And let me show you the two different spellings we showed earlier. When you look at the Afrika, when you look at the way it's spelled, you'll see Afrika, Avrika, Avrika, Afarika. You'll see those various spellings of people in northern AFURAKA, AFURAITKAIT today, including the Tuareg people. So Afrika and Afrika, the A and the Af, AU and AF, the exact same meanings in ancient Kemet. That proves it's a dialectical difference. And one of the reasons that we did that breakdown in Akan is because in the Akan language, you have both you have the spelling AFURAKA, HW, and some people pronounce it AFURAKA. You have both dialects. So one group of Akan people will say this region is called AFURAKA. Another group of Akan people will say this region is called AFURAKA because that HW hua is very close to fua. So AFURAKA, same thing. That's Afrika, and so forth. And this is a sacred region in Akan culture, talking about the beginning of creation. It says, Wenchi is the place where Odumakuma Buade, the divine prescriber, evolver, fashioner of the universe, made the world. And that is the place where they call the capital AFURAKA. So the Akan people are saying the same thing. And we talk about the Berber people, and that's the ancient Black Berbers, of course. But the final piece is here. Ifri and Afri and Afru and so forth. Most people have never seen this goddess. That is a form of Ra'et. In the late period in Rome and so forth, she was on these ancient coins and so forth. The ancient Black Berbers called her Afri and Ifri and Efri over 10,000 years. Later, Ifru and so forth, they called her a sun goddess and a cave goddess. Just like Ra moves through the sky during the day, operating through the solar disk and so forth. When he goes in the underworld and in the caverns and so forth, he's Afura. When she's sailing through the sky with Ra, she is Ra'et. Solar disk on her head, golden solar disk. But when she moves in the underworld, she's called Afrait, which became Afrait, Afri, also Afru and so forth. That's her. The whites in the offspring couldn't understand why this goddess was called Afri and Afru, and she could be a sun goddess and a cave goddess. Some of them thought it was a they're like, well, must have made a mistake because she can't be a solar deity. The sun is in the sky burning fire, but also a cave goddess. But when Ra's in the sky, he's Ra. When he's moving in the underworld, in the book of the Duat, the book of the caverns, he's Afura, and he's moving through the caverns of the caves in the underworld and so forth. So sun goddess, cave goddess, this is her. And of course, we've always known that. Now, by the time the Romans get there and so forth, they know about Afri, Ifri, and they commented on her. Nearly 2,000 years ago, the Roman author Pliny the Elder stated that nobody in Africa began any undertaking without first consulting the goddess Africa. Africa was the Roman title of the Berber divinity. Afri and the Berber, just the Nubians west of Kemet and so forth. Afri is as the goddess. Africa is called Dea Africa. And this is why you see Africa. She is seated here. She has the headdress of the sacred elephant. Hannibal led his troops on elephants and so forth in North AFURAKA to defeat the Romans. She has the headdress of the elephant with the trunk of the elephant. She's seated on a bench here. Another coin, the goddess Africa. They say Dea Africa in Latin, came from Afri. That's who she is. And in fact, let me pull this up real quick. Let me make sure you can. All right. We did a 2-part broadcast dealing with her. And just so you can see this image. And they will still debate about the goddess Africa. They'll try to say that she was created by the Romans, which is, of course, is absurd. When we did our Blog Talk radio broadcast a number of years ago, you see this is Rait in the middle. This is the coin, but this is an image of Afri, who they call Dea Africa. She has the headdress of the, with the trunk of the elephant and so forth, sacred animal. So we did that, a while back, but that's the headdress with the elephant trunk. That's Rait. She's on the coin. And we went into some detail about that. But some of them understand that she's an ancient goddess, and some of them tried to put forward the false notion that she's not, because they don't know who she is. And they don't understand the cosmology. So let's go back real quick. And so we also show, once again, just like Ra becomes Afura, Rait becomes, and this is just an image of Ra's Afura moving through the underworld and so forth. In the Book of Caverns, which is another, title of the ancient text from Kemet. Here's Rait. Here's another image of Rait from the Stela of Enherkau, another late period image of Rait and so forth. But she's Rait when moving through space and, the atmosphere and so forth. Afurait or Afuraida, Afru, Ifri, when moving through matter, including the spirit realm. Of course, this is the great coinage of the great Afurakani warrior Hannibal with the sacred, Abu or elephant and so forth, which became a sacred animal totem. So, there's also the fact that Afar, defined as dust, grains of soil, or sand, can be found as Ahra, Afra in ancient Kemet. That symbol, the Medut symbol, means grains of sand or soil. And of course, you have the Afar woman of Ethiopia. So now when you read through the book, you have that detailed information, but we show etymologically, phonetically, cosmologically, culturally, on every level, Afuraka, AFURAITKAIT is the land Ka of Afura, the land Kait of Afurait, and we as people of AFURAKA, AFURAITKAIT are the children of the Creator, Afura, and the Creatress, AFURAIT. So when we talk about our SPIRI-GENETIC identity, this is what we're talking about. Let me find this image right quick. So when we talk about the SPIRI-GENETIC identity, and we're going to talk about it in an upcoming broadcast, we said Ra is the divine living energy, the spirit force animating creation on the masculine side. Rait is the Ba'at, this feminine force animating creation on the feminine side. They're the divine living energy within the great divine body of the supreme being, Amen and Amenet. And for those who haven't seen an image of Amen and Amenet, let me just pull that up for you. All right, so it's another image of Amen and Amenet. This is Amenet, the great mother, Amen, the great father. And they are the great divine body of creation and the spiritual force animating their great divine body, just like the spirit force animating your body. The spirit forces animating them are Ra and Rait. Just like the divine living solar energy moving through you is your Ra force. If you're an AFURAKA man, so you're like Amen and you direct your Ra force to create for you. If you're an AFURAITKAIT woman, you're like Amenet, the great mother, and that solar force surging through you, your Ba'et. That is Ra'et, the creative force, your Ra'et force moving through you. So we are a microcosm as Black people of the macrocosm. But that is Amenet and Amen, the great mother and great father, supreme being. Ra and Rait are the Creator and Creatress, who are grandchildren of the supreme being and subordinate to Amen and Amenet and follow the direction of Amen and Amenet, just like you direct your life force energy to your hands, your legs, and so forth, so you can empower yourself to move and function and work and do and so forth. So this is what we're doing. Now, okay. So that is the information we want to share. No, it took a while. The book is very extensive, and we only went through a summarized version of the book, but you can read the book for free, the entire book, all 31 of our books, all 31 books that I've published to date are free downloads from the home page on our website, so you can get to those. We have a number of articles as well. We have a number of courses. We've taught 40 online courses. They are all archived. You can access those. And we also have a course coming up next Wednesday. And let me show you the information for that course. Hold on for a second. Okay. So we have our Susu course, meditation instructor certification. And you will see that we've done a number of different sessions dealing with that, but you can become certified as an instructor to teach Susu, which is the ancient term for meditation from our cultural cosmological foundation. Once certified, it's a 4-week course. Once certified, you can go into schools, after school programs, places of employment, human services agencies, cultural organizations, different places, and you can get paid to, conduct meditation sessions, whether it's youth or adults. Many schools are incorporating meditation in the beginning of the day to get the children focused so they can have better enhanced learning outcomes. Many places of employment bring people out for a seminar. They do like a 20-minute meditation session to increase work productivity. You go to study groups or even, treatment groups or, group therapy sessions at different organizations, human services organizations or women's shelters or whatever it is. They're utilizing meditation to help people get focused and reduce anxiety, reduce stress, assist them in their everyday lives and so forth. Also helps with weight loss. So there are a number of different applications for that. Once you have this certification through this 4-week course, you'll be, rooted, grounded in this information from a cultural perspective. And you teach meditation, the practice of it from a introductory capacity. If people want to learn more about cosmology and everything else, you can assist them with that. But when you go to a school, an organization, you're teaching the basic fundamental practice of Susu for enhanced learning outcomes, reducing stress, overcoming, anxiety, enhanced productivity, all the scientific benefits that have, been put forward for meditation, for Susu. That's what people are paying for. And you have a certification, you have a credential where you can go out and do that. So that course begins next Wednesday, July 10th. So we have some spaces still available when you go on the site. You'll see the information there. We do have a split deposit option. You can pay 50% up front and 50% in a couple of weeks. We also have, let me just show you. So you'll see all the information there. You will also see a number of the lives that we have done over the past few weeks on that page, going into a lot of detail about different aspects of Susu, meditation, and culture and cosmology. We also have an option that we created. You can receive a referral fee if you direct people to our, the course. If someone registers for the course and they register because you referred them, then you receive a referral fee. So our course is $399. It's basically $99 per week for 4 weeks. And when you get once you get certified and you go to your first, after school program, or your first cultural organization, or your first, human services organization, or wherever you go to teach, usually they pay about $100, $200 for a meditation session. They may want you to come once a week, or once every other week, or once a month or something. And you have a few of those set up, you make your money back within the first month or so. But we also have a referral fee option. So if someone registers for the course and they pay us the $399 for the registration for the course, if you referred them, then we will just send you $100 for referring them. Because if you didn't refer them, we wouldn't have known about the person. You can reach more people than, you have people you can reach that we don't know about. So if you refer a person and they register, you receive a $100 referral fee. If you refer 2 people, you receive $200. If you refer 7 people, you receive $700. As soon as they pay their registration fee, we will PayPal you or Cash App you the referral fee as a way of saying, I say we thank you for, reaching out and, connecting with people. Of course, our course is open to AFURAKAI, meaning African people, Black people only. We only teach our people. All of our courses are only open to our people. So when you have a referral, it can only be one of our people. We don't allow non-Black people in our classes. We teach our people for the benefit of our community. So, all right. So that course begins next week. So you can reserve your spot with a, $199 for the deposit if you like to do a deposit option. And then you can pay the other, you can pay the balance either next week or the week after. But you can reserve your spot for $199. And once again, if you, refer somebody, you can get a referral fee for that as well. Okay, let me check look in the chat room. I hadn't planned to go this long, actually, but it just took a minute to get through all that linguistic information. So I wasn't really checking through the chat because I was trying to get to the information we needed to get to. Okay, so in one of our books, Kuku Tuntun, The Ancestral Jurisdiction, we show that not only, as we said earlier, of course, Jesus, Yeshua, is a fictional character who never existed of any form or of any race. The same is true of Muhammad. The same is true of Allah. The same is true of Abraham, Isaac, Ishmael, Moses, Aaron, David, Solomon, Sheba, Menelik. The same is true of Buddha. Buddha is a corruption of the deity Ptah. There was no Buddha. There was no Black Buddha. There was no Asian Buddha. They took the cosmology of the deity Ptah and corrupted that cosmology for Buddhism as well as, Hinduism and Jainism and so forth. Those are corruptions. The Emerald Tablets are a late period corruption full of misinformation. So people are talking about that when you study our actual cosmology, the oldest religious compositions yet unearthed in the world are the Meru texts, the pyramid texts. When you look at the divinities and their interaction and so forth and how they animate the sun, moon, stars, black substance of space, oceans, rivers, atmosphere, core of Earth, inner core, and mantle and upper mantle, and so forth, and the animal totems associated with them, and the plant totems and so forth, and mineral totems. And then you look at the language and culture and cosmology of the various Afurakani, Afurakaini people across the continent, like we have done comparatively with the Yoruba and Akan and Ewe and Igbo and so forth. You find the same language, same deities, same sacred colors, same functions in creation, same cosmology and so forth across thousands of years and thousands of miles, even into North America. Those of us practicing the Hoodoo tradition, which is the Akan tradition, or the Juju tradition, which is the Yoruba tradition, or the Voodoo tradition, which is Ewe tradition, or the Wanga tradition, which is the Ovambo tradition, or the Ngangan tradition, which is the Fang tradition. We brought these same ancient traditions in our blood circles into North America and continue to practice them. So we get possessed by the same deities, same forces in creation, of course, ancient ancestral spirits, as we did when we were living in West and Central and South Afuraka, AFURAITKAIT before enslavement. And you compare the language and culture and cosmology of Hoodoo or Akan people in West Afuraka, AFURAITKAIT in the forest belt. And then you look at the Medutu, the hieroglyphs of ancient Kemet, same words, same deities, same functions, and so forth. So then when you see these late period texts, when they take fragments of our culture and corrupt them, like the Emerald Tablets and the Kabbalion and all these different things, you see how weak and corrupt these fragments are and how they don't have value, and they're misinforming people. All this foolishness about the Anunnaki and extraterrestrials, pure nonsense, pure foolishness, coming from Europeans. And then Black people embrace that and try to blacken it up. It's like trying to blacken up Santa Claus and the elves. That's what's happening. So, but you have to study our text first, and then you can compare them. Compare what they're saying about corruptions of our culture to our actual culture, and then you'll see the difference. Okay, so there's what Kemetic writings are most authentic or primary. And we'll say, for example, the Kemet T or the E, like a Y or I, they call that a Nisbi adjective in the language of Kemet. So that's that descriptive. So like instead of saying Nubian, we'll say Nubit is the region. Nubiti is that of Nubia. Or Kemet is the region. Kemeti is of Kemet. Or Kanit is a title of Nubia, a region of Nubia as well. Kaniti. So Kemetic, when you say ik, that's a European suffix to the language, even though you see a lot of people utilizing that. But just as an aside, linguistically, that's what it is. But the Kemeti writings, most authentic or primary, for instance, Budget's translation of the Legends of the Gods is from the Ptolemaic period. Are they reliable? So no, his translation. So in that particular book you're talking about, there are a series of different texts. They have some older texts from like the New Empire and so forth, like 3,300 years ago. But then they do have some texts from the Ptolemaic period. And even though you have the Ptolemaic period, you have, just like in South Afuraka, AFURAITKAIT, South Africa, the Dutch invaded and they took control. The Zulu and the Xhosa, Zulu, and the other people, we're still in the majority, but the Dutch were in control for a while. When the Greeks invaded, they were in control of the government and things like that. But of course, the majority population was still us. So much of the information, it's in the Ptolemaic style because they were using, they were imitating what we were doing. Some of them started putting their own faces and images in the sculptures and statuary of Kemet and so forth, the Greek rulers and later the Romans. But then some, there were still traditional priests and priestesses living in Kemet when the Greeks were ruling, just like there was Zulu people and Xhosa people still living in the region before, while the Dutch were in control, before they forced them out of control. So those texts are still, depending on the ones that you're reading, they're still viable, valuable texts, most of them. But of course, the ones where it's clearly, Greeks and Romans talking about themselves and corrupting the cosmology, of course, is different. But in that book, they have, different texts from different periods. So the good thing about a book, some of the books by Budge, they have the text of the Medutu in one line, the transliteration in the language of Kemet in the second line, and the third line is the translation in English. But you see the actual glyphs, and then you can learn to read and write the glyphs yourself, and you can study the reading and writing of the glyphs yourself so you can make corrections where necessary. The primary text from the Meru text, or coffin text, or pure papyri and so forth, the primary text, you can find primary text all over the internet. You can look at translations, but ultimately you have to, practice the reading and writing of the text. So one thing that we have, and let me show you this. Let me show you this right here. For people who are African-centered and so forth, and part of that school, as far as that movement, moving away from that Eurocentrism, part of that process was to show that the language of ancient Khanitic Kemet is apparent to these various languages across the continent. So again, when you compare, we can compare Akan dictionary from the people of Ghana and Ivory Coast, Akan people, to the hieroglyphic dictionary, which we've been doing for 20 years, and show the same words, same meaning, same everything, and we can give proper definitions. Where Europeans, if they weren't comparing African languages, there are certain things they're going to miss because they're not looking at the full language or the religious practice that's associated with that. So we can do that. So in that vein, on our Akongwa Suya page, and we'll put the link in the chat room, but that's the Akongwa Suya page on our website. We taught a number of different courses. Many of them were 6-week courses. Many of them were 4-week courses. Some were 7 weeks. A couple were 13 weeks and so forth. So you'll see that we have these various courses, and the archive versions exist. And the archive versions are 50% off from the live versions when they were live. So you'll see, for example, they're $15 for the 6-week courses, $10 for the 4-week courses, $20 for the 7-week, and so forth. So when you scroll down, you'll see the flyers, the original flyers for all the various courses. Like, for example, the Hebrews never existed. The Aperu course, it was a 4-week course. It was $20 when we were doing it live. Now you can access it for $10. But we're showing that just to show we did a 2-part course, 6 weeks for part 1 and 6 weeks for part 2. And that is this course. We have 40 courses altogether. Medutun Soro, Divine Inscription. And that's reading and writing the language of the hieroglyphs of Kemet, part 1. And then you have part 2. So you can go on our page. Okay, that's the Akongwa Suya page on our website. Hold on one second. And then you can check that out. If you look at, let me show one more piece. All right, this site is called Pyramid Texts Online. Online. So on Pyramid Text Online, they actually have the actual images of the pyramid text of Unas, actual photographic images, so you can see that. But then they also have translations, but they also have an index. So if you click on that, you'll see that. So they have the hieroglyphic version. You click on any wall, and you'll see the image of the wall, so you can see the text themselves yourself, or you can click the translations. But they also have the library section. And when you look in the library section, you'll see numerous links, just about any text from Kemet that you read about, that people talk about, all the various papyri and all the catalog texts that have been found over the couple of hundred years and so forth, that are cataloged. You can access them. You can see the actual text, or you can see translations and so forth. But again, you're learning to read and write the language yourself. Ultimately, that's the key. You can read the translations, you can look through them and so forth, but ultimately you want to get a text and start reading and writing. And there are different groups that teach the reading and writing of the, Medut and Torah. The difference when you deal with an African-centered or AFURAKA, people who are teaching, they will have that grounding in the fact that these languages are living languages on the continent. So you can compare and you can see things in the culture that, they wouldn't be able to see otherwise. Give you a prime example. And then we'll end it because I know it's, it's very late and I hadn't planned to go this long. Okay, no, this is a different text. Let me see. Okay. Short article based on work that we've been doing for a number of years and so forth. Precursor to a comparative dictionary of the Akan language and the language of ancient Kemet. But we did a short little article showing comparisons. So, for example, kes, to chatter foolishly, to jest in the language of Kemet. Kasa, to chatter, to talk much, talk noisily in Akan. Him, to roar, to bellow, battle cry, roar in Kemet. Hama, boisterous, the sea rages and so forth, raging, roaring and so forth, same term in Akan. Ka, or kai, to think out, to meditate, to speak, to repeat, say, cry out, call out, tell out. Ka, in the language of the Akan people, to emit a sound, to utter, speak, say, tell, same term. Sha, or shay, to fix, to appoint, to decide, to destine, to predestinate, to ordain. Shay, in the Akan language. To fix, to set up, institute, to celebrate, to set, constitute, appoint, and then to predestine. Predestination, to predestinate, to appoint or ordain beforehand. So these things are very specific. And that even Shayat is a title of a divinity, a male and female divinity that has to do with our divine function and not predestination, but our divine function in creation. But when you have something very specific like Shay, meaning to predestinate, to ordain beforehand and so forth, and Shay and Akan, meaning to predestinate, ordain beforehand, when you look at this dictionary in the Akan language, that was compiled in the beginning of the 1840s and 50s, meaning going to Akan people sitting in the forest in the 1840s and 50s and saying, what does this word mean in your language? What does this word mean? What does this word mean? And they're just giving you, they're speaking in the 1840s. And then when you take that dictionary, thousands of words and definitions in the Akan language of people speaking in the 1840s, and if they were elders in the 1840s and 50s, that means they were born in the 1750s and 60s. They weren't reading and writing English and so forth. They're just speaking their language and telling you what these words mean. And then you take these words, thousands of them, and compare them to a hieroglyphic dictionary written 100 years later. And the same words you find in ancient Kemet are the exact same words that the elder who was sitting in the forest in the 1840s was telling the informant. We're talking about the same language, same people, same cosmology, even the names of the deities, the goddesses and gods and so forth were part of creation. They govern all of that. And those same terms end up in the Hoodoo religion in North America 100 years later, because Hoodoo people are the Akan people and we speak the same language. So the mojo and the jackball and the term hoodoo and haint spirit and gopher doctor and gopher dust and all that, all these terms are Akan. We did a documentary film back in October, which is on our YouTube site. You can watch it for free. It's like 100 minutes long, full documentary film on how hoodoo is the Akan religion, Akan ancestral religion in North America. And we showed the connection to ancient Khanate Kemet as well. So. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and end it. We've been way over time, but we appreciate you, sticking in there with us while we're, getting this information out in a different way. We put this information out, in different ways, in different contexts and so forth, whether it's through the books, through, the online courses, Blog Talk Radio. We also have our documentaries. We have our Hoodoo Cast podcast that we have some episodes and we're starting that back up. But now we're also teaching our Susu, our meditation instructor course. So you can employ yourself actually. We give you the credential so you can take that and, employ yourself, generate income for yourself. And some people will do it independently full time. You set up a few sessions in a school, community center, cultural organization, place of employment, human services organization, 1 day a week, each week you would go to a different place, make $150 per session, per organization. You see each one of them once a week, and then you make $500 or $700 a week and you can sustain yourself. So this is the reason we're doing that, but you're impacting the community in a positive capacity while you're also generating income for yourself as an entrepreneur. So this is what we're working towards. Okay, so Yedase, we thank everybody for joining in with us. And Yebeshiabio, we will meet again. That's it.